Are any of you aware of a template for creating an organization to hold landlords accountable? One that is made up of landlords in a neighborhood? Question. Okay.
There was in Connecticut, when I was doing work there, and this brings me back a while, so I have to look up the specifics, but there was a specific program that was established to help landlords become more responsible landlords. The approach was that not every single landlord, by any stretch of the imagination, even an absentee landlord, is being irresponsible. A lot of them just don't know how to do appropriate tenant screening. They're not involved. They don't look at their leases carefully to have clauses in there that makes it easier for them to evict tenants who are problematic. So there was a whole program that was set up in Connecticut to focus on this. And there are approaches that I know that I use with communities when I was working with them that mirrored some of those things too, and that came out of my experience working for the City of New York's Department of Housing Preservation and Development. Tenant screening is very complicated, and you have legal considerations and constraints in terms of what you can do, but one of your best tools is the lease. It's also really important for the residents in a community, if they're dealing with a problematic landlord who is not addressing tenants who are being arrested, or they're not addressing overall issues in terms of a landlord's upkeep of their property, for them to start doing research. And this is part of the problem-solving approach. You look at that landlord and you start doing research in terms of how many other properties do they own in the community. Are they up to date on their taxes? Are there violations that the city has issued against that landlord? Who's the bank, bank or banks where they're getting their mortgages from? I mean, there are a lot of different components of this, but those are some examples. And that allows you then to start developing a plan in terms of a multifaceted plan in terms of how you can up the pressure on that landlord if you first meet with the landlord and approach them and say, here are issues that are happening in our community because of your building. And you go in with the assumption that the landlord is going to be cooperative and just wants some help, and then you connect them with different resources. Maybe there's another landlord or the city can help them in terms of looking at better lease provisions, or there are issues in terms of upkeep, and maybe there's somebody in the neighborhood who wants to help the landlord because it's somebody who got a piece of property that they inherited, and they don't really have the money to really upkeep it, but they still want to keep it in their family. So that's just sort of a look at some different ways you can look at how to deal with landlords. But you do have some genuine landlords who are just landlords, and those need to be addressed with in a very serious way because they're cancer in the neighborhood, and very likely not just in your neighborhood, but in other neighborhoods in the city. And those kinds of working with other communities on those issues makes you a very powerful coalition.